It took a great deal for Lara Croft to even exist. Way back during its original conception, Tomb Raider was initially going to feature a man, but the designer felt that that would be too similar to Indiana Jones, and as such Lara Croft was born. That first game was also developed by just a handful of people, and with Lara's character model having just over 500 polygons, and her iconic, points supposedly being due to an accident and then left in as a bit of a joke. Sony did everything in their power to get the developer to change it for a male character or indeed a dinosaur, but then after testers said how good it was, it got the green light and Lara Croft continued on her journey. I was personally a little skeptical when I saw that Aspyr had taken on the role of this one, not because they're a bad developer or indeed publisher, but because one of my favourite games of all time, Knights of the Old Republic, was due to get a remake, and from what I understand that's now disappeared or been taken off the table. Now, having seen what they've done here, I really wish they'd have been able to keep that, or that maybe I'm wrong with that and they're still going to do it, because this is mighty impressive. My name's Marc Walker, welcome back to Switch Up. Why do I think they've got all the most important points right? Well, let's find out. Now, I'm not going to go into details of the 3 different games and their narratives, but what I will say is I actually really have found it refreshing how minimalist the storyline was in these older games, particularly when you compare it to some of the more modern Tomb Raider releases. This came from an era where they didn't necessarily have the capacity or the budget to create these bombastic cinematic cutscenes, and as such everything as far as narrative goes was the bare bones, the essentials, what you needed to understand what was going on. Sure, as the games progressed, they introduced a few extra bits here and there as the budget went up, but there's something to be said for less being more. It was the environments themselves and the intricate stage design that had to be the star of the show, and it still holds up to this day. The gameplay feels very much the same as it always did, however we do have quite a few new options. Now, as you may well already know, you can have the original or a new set of controls. The original being tank controls like Resident Evil, and these updated ones allowing you to move in any direction. If enemies come on screen, your guns will automatically track them, and if you want Lara to do a barrel roll, well, that's the push of a button as it always was. Personally, I do think they should have added in a camera lock-on mechanic, like you'd find in any modern game where you'd click the right stick in and both the camera and the pistols would lock onto the enemy. This would then allow you to easily strafe around, but in fairness it would change the feel of the game and it would make it much easier. And on that subject, they're not easy games, especially the second one, where the number of enemies just ramps up. And, well, Sony got their dinosaur in, didn't they? Now, the meme that every game needs to be compared to Dark Souls, well, I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to compare Dark Souls to Tomb Raider. I actually think they took a lot of inspiration from some of the way these games were designed. You have incredibly difficult enemies, maze-like levels that require you to backtrack, unlock certain doors and then progress by actually heading back towards the start, and storytelling that wasn't necessarily done by the characters within the game, but those environments, as well as an incredible soundtrack. The new controls then, well, they are going to jar slightly with some of the level design. A couple of things to note: if you hold the right trigger and then run off of an edge, she'll automatically spin round and grab a ledge. Another one, make sure you use the walk button because she'll never fall off of a cliff as it will automatically stop you. Those 2 things alone will make the controls much less frustrating, and just bearing in mind that even if she's not facing in the right direction, if you jump and use the left analog stick, you can send her in whichever direction you want. Before I figured those things out, it felt so clunky. But even so, you can probably see from the footage there are times where much of the game's difficulty comes from wrestling those controls. Progression between stages sees you leave an area and actually begin the next stage exactly from where you were. But this design still gives it a coherence that modern games sometimes lack when they hop all over the place. Aside from pulling switches, jumping to different platforms, and fighting off packs of wolves, it all gets a little more unusual when the dinosaurs are introduced, and then you head off to Venice, jump in a speedboat, fight off some gangsters and head off down the canals. Some of the choices were a little unusual, but because of the visual changes, it really is enjoyable to go back and see exactly how much work they've done. The gameplay across the 3 games remains quite consistent. It's the same winning combination of level design, enemies, secrets, and to some degree survival that's as appealing now as it was then. Unfortunately, the controls, not quite as much. For me, I would give gameplay 18 out of 20. I think it's really enjoyable still. However, that's caveated with controls which score 12 out of 20. Every single element in this game has been completely remastered, if not entirely remade. From the redrawing of artistic assets on the walls, to Lara's model being completely redesigned, including facial animations and lip syncing for the speech within cutscenes, down to her mansion being completely redesigned, and it looks fantastic. Not only do we now have real-time shadows, we've got some volumetric lighting effects, things like God rays coming down from the heavens, and a glorious 60 frames per second frame rate, which is very consistent when you're playing in both docked or handheld modes using that new style. I did see a comment yesterday on our preview video. Someone basically said, "I'm really not happy, I don't like the new style. They should have kept it as it was before." Now I scratched my head a little, questioning what preview they'd watched, but obviously a huge part is the fact that you can just hit the plus button and play the game as it was before. I didn't really know what they were saying, to be honest. I didn't understand. But when you do switch back to the original version, it runs at 30 frames per second as it did on its PlayStation release. And I saw someone else who was quite angry that that part didn't run at 60. I guess they could add that in as a toggle just to keep everyone happy, but you're not going to please everyone. I think they've done an incredible job visually, bar one aspect, and that is the brightness levels. The brightness is not quite right. I know the game was always dark, but when you play it in handheld, you can see everything. And when you switch over to docked, it's far too dark in certain areas on the remastered side. So hopefully they can include some form of gamma slider just to clean that up. Load times are instantaneous. Save games, they're instant, and then when you load, it will literally be there before you've even thought about how long that's taken. You will need to manually save. Saves will be exactly where you left off, and the load between stages is also almost instant. It's not just the visuals though that have seen a complete rework. It's my understanding that they actually got in some of the original voice actors to re-record dialogue to improve the overall clarity, and they did that as well for the sound effects and the music. Not necessarily re-record them all, but improve the quality, the fidelity, and it really emphasizes some of the environments with that spatial sound design. Visuals and performance, what can I give? It scores 20 out of 20. Sound and audio, while improved, isn't top marks, but is very good. It scores 18 out of 20. The trilogy is going to set you back £26.99 at an RRP, and it has a 10% discount at the moment until the date on screen. That's for all three games as well as their respective DLCs. I think that would be reasonable even if it was just a normal remaster, but this includes huge quantities of remake elements and they're asking a reasonable price. Now the only caveat again would be that there isn't yet a physical, and Aspyr I believe said they haven't announced anything yet, which we obviously know. I guess that might mean depends how well it sells. So with that in mind, buy it because I want this physically. There's a lot of value here. It scores 19 out of 20. Now I believe Saber were involved with this process, but still Aspyr have done a cracking job, and I don't think fans will feel let down in any way, shape or form. This is a real pleasure to play. Sure, the controls aren't great, they're never going to be really, but they've done their best in modernising those, and I think most are going to be pleased with what they get. It gets a switch up score of 87%. Thanks so much to the publisher for the review copy. Let us know down in the comments if this is one you're going to be picking up. And as always, just a big thanks to all of you, our Patreons, our members, and for all things Switch all the time, keep your Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!